Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New York Sports Report for the New York Hockey Report for New York Sports Day. I am Joe Soccoa. We got a special one for you as we are bringing in New York Sports Day's own Leslie Treff for the conversation on the three local teams of the Rangers, Islanders, and Devils. Leslie, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and welcome to the New York Hockey Report.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about being here and talking to you about local professional hockey.
Well, let's get right into it. And the first team we have to talk about is probably the team I think you and I, and amongst others, are a little bit surprised at the way things have really gone for them. And that's the New York Rangers, winners of 4 in a row. They have a chance to make it 5 in a row when they hit the ice on Friday night against the Detroit Red Wings, who are also in that rebuild type phase. But overall, you've seen the Rangers play over the last 4 games. What has stood out to you the most, and how surprising is this, at least from your perspective, of how the Rangers have been playing?
Well, the Rangers have been playing well. What they're doing is buying into the system that Coach Quinn has set forth for them. And we're starting to really see them congeal and become a real team. And that's I think the most important thing when you have a rebuild is to have players stick up for each other, play with each other, and become a team. There were a lot of changes last year, a lot of the veterans left, and there are some young players on the team now, and they are players of the future, and they're really starting to feel like a part of a team. And I believe that that's the most important thing.
Well, the Rangers right now sit at 7-7-1, so they're at 500, 15 points. They're really essentially 1 point out of a wild card spot, but it's still too early in the season to talk about any sort of playoff chases. But you're in that room interviewing the players, at the end of each game. You're listening to the coach speak. What's the feeling in that room amongst those players right now?
Well, the feeling is mostly optimism. That's what they're going to project anyway. Within the room, Coach Quinn is pretty straightforward and honest with us when he talks to us. So we'll get a feeling like, for example, in the game against Montreal, he wasn't really happy with the play early in the game, and he told us that. Clearly, the Rangers had to come back and didn't look good. I mean, the beginning of the game looked absolutely horrible. As I'm sure you remember, the puck jumped over Neil Pionk and wound up in Lundqvist's net very quickly. That was very disheartening. And one of the things you could see is that the Rangers didn't give up. And that's kind of a change from when AV was around, because what you saw after that most of the time was sort of people hanging their head, players hanging their head. Not only players, fans too, but in this team, this new team, the players are not giving up. And the coaches are coaching differently. So you're going to hear it from Coach Quinn. If you're not playing well, he's really going to give it to them. However, he's the kind of coach who can also praise you when you're doing well. So he has very good communication with his players, particularly the young players. There's good leadership in the locker room. And despite some average performances from a few veterans, we're starting to see the future of Howden, the future with Hedel, and even you just saw one game with Anderson, but his play was excellent. Just the little things he learned how to do.
And it's so incredible to sit here and think, at least from a fan's perspective, of what you were just talking about, how that this team is certainly different from a team under Alain Vigneault, who, of course, was relieved of his duties after last season. Quinn, in his first year as Rangers coach, that they're not hanging their heads, especially when they were down. You mentioned that incredible comeback for the Rangers in that third period against Montreal. They were down 3-1. They stuck with it. They came back, stormed back. Neil Pionk went coast to coast, looking like a Brian Leetch-esque play from his own end and finding the back of the net very quickly on a 4-on-4. So that's just incredible to think about it, how much this team and the culture has changed in that locker room. And you're certainly dead set and dead right on Coach Quinn, and that's something that I think a lot of the fans really like to see, is that he will hold players accountable if they are not playing well, and it seems as if they respond very well to him, in a way, disciplining players. We saw Pavel Buchnevich benched for 2 games, trying to get him going, and he seemed to have a little bit of a better game against Montreal, a little bit more involved. As you mentioned, Anderson, he took a couple of penalties, a couple of high-sticking penalties in the game against Montreal, but he still looked noticeable on the ice. And that's something that, at least with Coach Quinn, is that he'll hold you accountable, but if he notices you're doing something, he'll keep you out there and reward you with the ice time.
Well, I never meant to say that Anderson was perfect on the ice, and he certainly is going to have to be more disciplined. However, it was very clear that he's going to be an excellent two-way player. He's much more physical in an effective way than, let's say, Philip Hedl is, who looks to me to be more of an elite goal scorer and playmaker. So I think that the Rangers did maybe inadvertently. I'm hoping it was on purpose. They took a two-way player, or someone who's going to be an excellent two-way player, in Anderson first, and then they took the sniper second. Either way, they did a good job, and I would expect that both of them are going to develop into excellent NHL players. Anderson, a little bit less of a sure thing, and just that's my opinion, because I'm concerned a little about his skating. No one really talks about this, but I've watched him skate, and I just have a little bit of a raised eyebrow, but we'll have to see. On the other hand, someone like Neil Pionk, that might have been the highlight of his career. Do not expect him to be Brian Leetch. I know people are talking about it now; they're talking him up. Neil Pionk will be and is, to some extent now, and will continue to grow into a solid NHL player. I don't expect him to be Leetch-like in his entire career, and I hope you don't expect that either.
No, not at all. But that was something pretty cool to see, and what he did as far as, and I think that was something that I think he himself felt really good about, considering that first goal that went in, 40 seconds into the game against Montreal. So I think that was a little bit of redemption for him, and it felt good. I want to transition a little bit too, because you and I both know, and we both are on social media, more so Twitter, keeping up with your readers and followers. And this is where now we're in this little, I guess, conundrum where in this day and age, we're seeing draft picks come out and the young players that are coming into this game. You look at Ranger Twitter, and we all know Ranger Twitter could be a very interesting place at times. And I'm talking more specifically about the fans that kind of knew going into this season we weren't going to expect much from the New York Rangers. We understood the whole part of the rebuild process and the fact that maybe they want to get within the top 10 again with the draft. Now they're starting to win some games, and you see a lot of fans who are like, no, as much as you don't want to see your team lose, nobody wants to see their team lose. But I just want to get your take on that whole aspect of, at least from the fans' perspective and the fans' part of wanting to kind of see your team lose so they can get a higher draft pick so they can continue to build on this foundation that they're trying to do.
Well, I disagree with losing to get a top pick in this case for this year. And here's why. I think there are enough really good players in the top 20 certainly the top 15, that the Rangers will get one of those players, unless they're going to be number one and pick Hughes. I think there are a large number of U.S. players on the national team that will be wonderful players in the NHL. Now, you can't be sure, but they're solid picks in those first 15 to 20 players. And this year actually may be one of the best crops of U.S. players that we've seen. So it's an amazing group. So I would not want this team to be losing to get a higher pick. It may not be worth it at all.
So then in that
Okay,
case...
so that's the first thing. But there's a second piece to this. I don't think it's in David Quinn's DNA to lose games to get a high draft pick. I think if he thought that was the case, he wouldn't have taken the job. And he really wanted an NHL job, and he wanted this job. But if anyone would have told him that he had to lose or he should try to lose games, it's just not in his nature. And I know that they've won 4 in a row, but you have to look at who they've really been playing against and what the circumstances were. So I know Montreal started off well, but they're not a top team. Let's talk about Nashville. Let's talk about Tampa Bay in their top usual form, even Boston. I just don't see the Rangers at this point beating them in a way that would be resounding and continuing this. Just like I don't see the Islanders continuing their quick start. However, I think it's a good foundation. I think it's wonderful for the fans. I think it's wonderful for the players. But I still am really unsure that the Rangers will come anywhere near the playoff hunt as we go along. And along those lines, you haven't asked me yet, but along those lines, I really do think that there will be some players that will be leaving this team when it comes to the trade deadline.
Well, we are going to definitely get into that before we transition over into the Islanders, as you mentioned. But with this Rangers team, so listen, I totally understand, and I agree 100% on the fact that if David Quinn felt that, or at least felt that this team was looking to lose to get a higher draft pick, he would have never taken the job. This team is really playing hard. Listen, I was impressed. You talk about the top teams. I was impressed against their opening night matchup against Nashville, in which they lost, which they could have won that game. I was impressed at night one. So it'd be interesting to see as we get into when they start playing these top teams where they stack up. We understand that they like you said, it won't be resounding, but they're certainly going to give you a problem. And that was one of the key things that David Quinn talked about coming into the season, that we want teams to look at the New York Rangers on the schedule and we want to give them a problem for 60 minutes. And there's no doubt about it that is the objective and the goal. So now you mentioned, they're sitting on this 4-game win streak. We understand they're still trying to build this foundation. So now I will officially ask you, what do you see this team doing when it comes to the trade deadline? And we've seen some, things out there that maybe the Rangers should start this a little bit earlier than teams normally would when it comes to, maybe trading off some players to continue to build the foundation.
Okay, well, we can start this is way out there and I know nothing. So let me just tell you that there's Nylander out there who is unsigned in Toronto. If you want to talk about before the trade deadline, and this is just there is no rumor here. I'm just talking about it now. And I'm saying that December 1st is the deadline to sign him. And, the Toronto Maple Leafs are definitely a contender this year. So the question becomes, are the Rangers interested in trading one of their players would probably be on the defense side.